Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers, where we are nearly at the end of our complete A to Z of PS2 Hidden Gems. Can you believe we looked at over 200 games? Thanks to the help of many of you, we've had a great selection, and the letter X was actually surprisingly packed as well, though I did have to double dip into a franchise, which I don't like to do, but it was either that or some really awful racing games. Anyway, you know the drill, so how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. Here is X Squad. This is a very early third-person action game for the system. In fact, it was a launch game. You control Ash, the leader of X Squad, a team made up of elite soldier types. You're on high alert as W Squad have been killed, and a top scientist woman has been kidnapped and her experiments stolen. And if these get into the wrong hands, well, it would be slightly annoying. The game takes you and your squad through various locations which are exciting in the early 2000s, like underground bases, sewers, and even more bases. Yep, get ready for lots of grey and brown. Thankfully, the gameplay is actually pretty fun, if a little janky, but as it's a launch game, I'm sure we can forgive it. The missions are pretty linear, and you'll need to explore the environments that are packed with enemies, lifts, and locked doors. You'll need to kill the enemies, find keys and switches that will open the locked doors and activate the elevators to the next floor or level. Depending on the mission, you'll have up to 3 squad members with you as well, each of which have their own weapons and styles of fighting. You've got ones that prefer sneaking around, and the one with a big machine gun and muscles that just wants to kill everyone and spout one-liners. The combat here is pretty hectic and not always easy. You get a selection of weapons including pistols, machine guns, shotguns and so on, and what's cool is that any you unlock along the way can be selected before you start a new mission, and you can kit out your character as well as the computer controlled characters to make sure everyone has the best equipment and weapons for each mission. You do get a generous auto-aim, which I thought at first would make things too easy, but that's not the case. It's great when you only have a few enemies, but there's usually 5 or 6 on the screen at the time, and they're all quite accurate themselves. You can help your chances by crouching and hiding behind obstacles, and you do have the ability to lean out from cover, which comes in very handy. Levels do have a few checkpoints in them, and you never get too far back if you do die. You can give your teammates commands, which they follow pretty well, so they'll sneak around and be quiet, or go in guns blazing if you tell them to. You can even ask them to scout around and they'll let you know if there's any enemies or items that they find. I was actually surprised at how useful the other team members were and started using them quite a lot. The controls here can be a little confusing at times, and you can tell this was an early game where they hadn't quite figured out the best way to do things, but they certainly aren't bad. Same with the graphics. It's an early game, so nothing too special, but it does the job. I do quite like the water effects though. I also really love the voice acting. It's that terrible early 2000s voice acting that is somehow bad and great at the same time. It would have been nice if the missions had a bit more variety other than just getting to the end of the level, but when you get there you will always fight a boss, and some of these are pretty cool shootouts where you're constantly shouting at your team to either hide, attack or draw fire. Something that is also a real shame is that you can't actually play as any of the other characters, only Ash. This game is really bloody cheap though, and I enjoyed my time with it. I would recommend giving it a try if you can. Here is Xyanide Resurrection. This is the sequel to Xyanide, which was an Xbox exclusive, but this one wasn't released on Xbox, so if you want to play it there, you can just suck it. I haven't played the first one, but that doesn't really matter. From what I can tell, there's a spooky ethereal woman-girl thing, presumably the big bad from the previous game. She's stuck in a strange dimension, but is trying to bust out and no doubt be a right little prick. So you get in your spaceship and set out to stop her and her army of strange things that she seems to be sending through the portals. The game is an on-rail shooter, and what's interesting is that most of the levels seem to be FMV. It's 3D though, so you can fly your ship around to a certain degree, kinda like Star Fox, but there's times where you're on a fixed path and rather than move your actual ship, you're just rotating your guns. This means that sometimes you'll dodge enemy attacks by moving out of the way, but other times you'll need to shoot them down as you can't actually move your ship. It can be a little disorienting when there's no notification when it changes. Even when you can move your ship though, you still have to keep an eye on your radar for all the enemies that attack from every angle, and they can appear from anywhere and you need to look around you quite a lot. You've got a basic laser shot and a bomb attack to start with, and you can hold down the laser button to do a lock-on, which is very handy. But what's cool is that the enemies drop crystal things to collect. These are basically money, and you can use them between missions to buy shields, new weapons, lives, bombs and so on. A lot of these items are very useful too, so don't pass them up. You can only equip 4 things at a time though, so choose carefully. Something else I like is that you can choose your path between levels. Essentially this is just the difficulty. The levels themselves all have a bit of a strange feel to them, but in a deliberate way, and there's actually a pretty cool atmosphere to this game, with you exploring unknown dimensions where enemies come out of nowhere, and you even have to avoid debris and asteroids that appear from time to time. I have to say, I really do like the visuals here. There's some cool enemy designs that get stranger the further you get, with the usual spaceships to start with. But soon you fight demonic looking space heads and dragon looking things, all of which fire a ton of projectiles at your ass. You'll fly through solar systems, strange planets, deserted colonies and so on as you play, and while the FMV is a little grainy, I kinda like the way it looks. I feel like some people say it's just bad, sorry, this is the internet, they'll say it's trash or garbage, but I think it has a cool style. It's a difficult game though, giving you just a few lives, but you are able to save, so you don't have to start from the beginning every time, and you do get a health bar. The music is also great, it's a techno drum and bass soundtrack that is very 2000s. If you like rail shooters or games that are pretty quirky, then this is one you should try out. Fighting game time now with X-Men Next Dimension. Yep, it's a one-on-one fighting game starring your favourite freaks, and some that I had never heard of, but I don't read the comics, so that's not surprising. There is a story here about a bloke called Bastion who got killed, and now Sentinels are coming to Earth to kill all mutants. On top of this, there are anti-mutant humans all over the place as well, so basically everyone's just kicking off and being angry. That means for some reason you need to have a bunch of one-on-one fights. There's 2 main game modes here, Arcade, where you just choose from a roster of heroes and villains, and you fight through a series of battles until you've beaten everyone. Then there's the story mode, which does the thing that I actually really like in fighting games, where you don't actually choose a character and it's all just dependent on the story, though at times you are given a choice from a small selection of characters depending on what's going on. I do always appreciate this, as I'm someone who likes to play as different characters and not stick to the same one every time. No matter who you play as though, you'll find a surprisingly decent fighting game here. Sure, it's no Street Fighter or Tekken, but it's still decent. Everyone you play as has their own fighting styles and special moves, and of course, as they are established characters, these are all relevant to them. So Cyclops is good from a distance with his eye beams, Wolverine is good up close with his sharp nails, and then you have people like Juggernaut, who's just a massive hulking brute that is so much fun to play as. I tried out most of the characters, and there really is a lot of difference, with some being much easier to learn and control than others. Forge and Gambit, for example, were both fun, but they had a lot more technical moves to them than the basic brawlers, so there should be someone here for everyone, and you will do well to learn a couple of the characters here. There are super moves as well. You can build a bar that has 4 notches on it, and the higher it is, the more powerful the move you can do. A single bar will do low damage, but if you pull off your most powerful move, you can do nearly half a health bar's worth of damage in one go. These are cool, but I do wish they were a bit more cinematic rather than just being long combos. Ah well. Graphically, it's not all that impressive to be honest. The animation is good and smooth, but the character models on some of the characters are just downright ugly and pretty wooden. The controls are good though, and the moves are easy to pull off, and thankfully you do get a move list in the pause menu. If you like X-Men and fighting, this is well worth a look. As always, it's a game that could be great with a few friends on game night. And yes, here we have another X-Men game with X-Men Legends. This is a top-down action RPG starring your favourite freaks. At the start of the game, Wolverine and Cyclops are tracking down Mystique and the Blob, who are hassling a teenage girl called Allison, as she's a mutant with volcano powers and they want to recruit her to the Brotherhood. You save her and take her back to the X-Men mansion, where you chat to a few other X-Men and find out that all sorts of sibling issues are happening. Cyclops' brother is being a twat, Colossus' brother has gone missing, and so on. So basically you go on missions through various locations around the world, and even not on the world, to fight evil and rescue people. You know, X-Men stuff. Throughout the game, you get 15 characters to take control of, and depending on the level, you can have up to 4 on screen at once. Characters include the usuals like Cyclops, Storm, Wolverine, Beast and Gambit, as well as some that I'm not too familiar with, like Emma Frost. You can even play as Professor X in some places, which is quite rare. Missions are all just a case of exploring what is essentially a big maze, though they're also quite linear, and never too hard. You run around looking for enemies to fight until you get to the boss. You'll need to find keys and beat enemies to break barriers and so on. The combat is easy, you've got a weak and strong attack, a throw button, and a special attack modifier. You can also jump and do air attacks. Hammering the weak and strong attack buttons does various combos, and defeating enemies will level you up. All characters level up independently, so be sure to swap them out often so they're all fairly strong, unless you just want to play as one person for the whole thing. When you level up, you can choose where your points go, whether it's health, attack, defense, or unlocking more of your mutant abilities, which are always specific to the character. To use your special moves, you hold R2, and then you press the corresponding button that pops up. They're easy to do, and all the mutant powers, which can also be upgraded, are fun to use, and you can even do combo attacks, mixing your attacks with some of the other characters. Dotted around the levels, you'll find extraction points. You can use these to swap out characters during the levels. This can sometimes be important, as some characters are better suited to some levels than others, and you will sometimes find places where you need a certain person's power to interact with it. For example, you might need to create a bridge out of ice, so you're going to need Iceman. Often these things aren't compulsory though, but you will save a lot of time and you won't need to take the long way round. Enemies come in a nice variety with plenty of robots and soldiers, but the standouts are really the bosses, which are all just evil characters from the comic books. They can be pretty damn tough, and you'll need to use the health and mutant power potions that you collect to stay alive. Graphically, I think it looks really good. The characters are cel shaded, so it looks decent, and the environments will have a good amount of detail. The only real issue with the game is that it is very repetitive, as are most games like this. You're really just doing the same thing over and over for every level while levelling up. Don't get me wrong though, it is still fun, and of course it's even better with 3 mates, each taking a character, but it's one of those games that, for me, is best played in short bursts, and it's quite a long game, taking well over 10 hours to play through. It is a must-have though, and it even has a sequel, Rise of Apocalypse. I have both of these on the GameCube, which is where I first played it, but actually I haven't played the second one yet. It is on my to-do list though. Right, the next two might be seen as cheating, but I don't care. This is XII Stag, or 12 Stag as it should be called. It's a vertically scrolling shooter from Taito. They didn't really bother with the story here, but I'm alright with that. All you need to know is that you control a spaceship that suits blue stuff, and you need to kill everything you see. The game is really presented as a score attack game. You do have lives, but you can continue as much as you like. However, you will lose your score if you do continue. To attack, you've got a rapid fire blue laser. It's pretty powerful, and killing enemies will sometimes make them drop blue orbs. Collecting these will either power up your shot or make you move slightly faster. You also have a side shot, which is one of the game's interesting mechanics. To do this, you have to tap away from the direction you want to shoot and then quickly press the direction you do want it to fire. So to shoot left, you tap right then left. This will fire a powerful projectile sideways that does more damage than your usual one, though it does have a much shorter range, requiring you to be very close to enemies, so of course it is dangerous to use. However, there are times where enemies will just stay next to you, so you've got no choice but to use it. You also have a backwards shot that automatically happens if an enemy is behind you and close enough. You've got a bomb attack, which is actually a shield. You fire out the bomb and then press the button again to detonate it. This opens up a shield. Any enemies or enemy bullets that touch it will just explode, but you can hide inside it for a few seconds if it's active, so you don't take damage. Enemies come in a few varieties, but they aren't particularly exciting. They're your usual spaceships and tanks that you see in a lot of games like this. The bosses as well are just massive mechanical things, and while they don't look bad, they certainly won't stick in your head like the bosses from R-Type or Darius. Though I will say the graphics here are very good. They're all pre-rendered and look decent with some smooth action, and I never saw any slowdown even with dozens of enemies and bullets on screen at once. And that's really all there is to say. It's a fairly standard shooter with a couple of cool mechanics, but it is one that I would recommend if you like this sort of thing. It looks good, the controls are solid, and it's a good challenge. And here is XIII. Okay, yeah, I know it's 13. Now, I nearly didn't include this one as it's not really a hidden gem, and I probably could have saved it for the numbers video, but everyone knows about it, it's awesome, so I did want to include it here anyway. 13 is a great first-person spy shooter based on a comic book series with an emphasis on its espionage story. After you wake up on a beach with no memory of who you are or what has happened, you're rescued by a sexy lifeguard who is quickly gunned down, and then you have to set off to uncover the truth about what's happened. Turns out you've been framed for the murder of the president, but did you really do it? Who knows? The game is incredibly ambitious, combining a mix of first-person shooting, stealth and story elements, and I do have to say, it actually holds up really well, and actually pulls most of them off. I remember this game got just about average reviews on its release, but I really can't see why, as it is just so much fun to play. Missions take place in a variety of locations across the world and are packed with enemies, weapons and items. Depending on the mission, there might be a load of civilians too, so you can't run around killing everyone, but if you can't kill them, you can usually knock them out without being penalised. To do this, or to knock out enemies for that matter, you tend to need one of the many items littered around the levels, like a chair, a broom, a bottle or something like that. You can find them and pick them up and use them to smash people over the head and knock them out in just one hit. You see, stealth plays a big part, and it is possible to go through the majority of missions without being detected from the majority if you wanted to, but I do like shooting people, so that's what I did when I could. Thankfully, the shooting here is also very good. You get loads of different pistols, shotguns, rifles and sniper rifles to use, and they all feel really good. You also get gadgets like a grappling hook that you can use at certain places to help you get to new areas. You'll also find health packs that you can use whenever you need to, which is handy as it can be easy to die. Turns out being shot isn't good for you. As mentioned, the story here is a big part of the game and it's told really well. You can get cutscenes before and after each level and also during the levels. David Duchovny voices Jason Fly, the main character, and he does his usual half-bored sounding spiel, but I like it. 90s singer Eve plays Jones, your partner, and they both do a good job. But it's just the way that the game is presented that is so good. Comic book style panels will appear on the screen as you play to show you nearby enemies that you need to be aware of that are about to spot you, or maybe they're going to be setting off an alarm. Or if you do a particularly skillful kill, you get a triple replay in boxes that pop up as you carry on playing. It's really cool and something that should be used in a lot more games. Also, there's a lot of little touches here and there. For example, if you stand still and there's an enemy nearby, you can actually see their footsteps appearing on the screen just to let you know where they are. These are really cool touches. Obviously, one of the main things that people remember are the graphics. The cell shading here just looks amazing even to this day. Some of the animations are a little bit basic though, but all the characters and weapon models are great and the levels themselves are really cool. This is definitely a game to show off how good cell shading games can be. Now, you'll likely already know that the game got a remake in 2020, which was slammed for being a really crappy, cheap remake. And they even changed the graphic style so it wasn't cell shaded anymore, which was basically the main selling point for the game. Apparently the side effect of that was that people went out and bought the original instead, which is somehow still the better game, but I'm okay with that as it's a lot of fun. It does have a few janky things in it, like some dodgy stealth and escort parts, but overall it really is a fantastic game that's way better than even the reviews of the time would lead you to believe. I highly recommend playing this game through, especially as it's really cheap if you get it for one of the old consoles. Xena Warrior Princess is a very budget game based on the awesome series starring the lovely Lucy Lawless. You are Xena, an ass-kicking warrior princess who's on a mission to save her friend Gabrielle, who's been captured and put in a torture chamber thing where she's chained up and the room is slowly filling with water. You have until she drowns to complete the game. It's a 3D platform adventure and you need to make your way through a large castle where Gabrielle is being held and get to her before she sleeps with the fishies. All the levels require you to do the same thing: explore the area, fight enemies and find switches which open the large doors that lead to the next level. Do this 5 or 6 times and you win. Xena has a few abilities. She can fight and you can use your fists or feet to punch and kick, though this is pretty weak, so you'll want to press the handy L1 button to get your sword out. This is much more powerful. You've got a few basic combos and enemies here are pretty stupid, so they don't put up much of a fight, but they can still kill you as they might decide to ignore your attacks. That's right, this game isn't the most polished one out there. You also have your chakram, which is like a frisbee boomerang thing. You can throw this at enemies to stun them for a bit, and you also need to use it to press certain switches. These will usually open doors, which then lead to more switches, and so on, until you find the ones that open the exit. There's also a lot of platforming you need to do, with blocks that need pushing and pulling around to make bridges or to press pressure plates. If you do die, don't worry too much, as you're just sent back to the most recent checkpoint. These look a bit odd and don't really fit with the game, but then again, this is one of those games that probably didn't start out as a Xena game, and they just threw the license on it last minute when they got it for cheap. You really can tell it's a budget game in just about every way. The graphics are very basic, the environments are very blocky, looking like upscale PS1 graphics, and the character models aren't much better. The controls are very slippery and the platforming is hard, mainly due to poor collision detection rather than a genuine challenge. But there is something kind of addictive about the game. It's short and easy, and you can beat the game in about an hour if you wanted to, especially if you've played it a couple of times before and know where you need to go. At any point you can pause the game and you can check on Gabrielle to see how far up the water is and how much time you have left roughly. You also find sand timers in the levels which will lower the water level, giving you more time, but there's never actually a timer that you can just check. So should you play this game? Well, yeah, it's one of those sort of so bad it's kind of enjoyable games. If you do have the choice, you should definitely play the PS1 Xena game instead though, as that's an actual proper game and is genuinely very good, whereas this one is better just to kind of laugh at. Don't pay money for it though. XGRA, or Extreme G Racing Association, is the 4th game in the futuristic racing series. It's the future, so all the characters have 2000s future tude, looking like something out of either The Matrix or a dodgy anime. They each have their own futuristic motorcycles to race, and of course their own stats in terms of speed, acceleration, handling, weapons and so on. You can compete in a bunch of different cups taking place across various planets, and your one and only goal is to do better than the others, and to have more points at the end of the racing series. Yep, it's a racing game. Being a future racing game, there's lots of neon stuff all over the place, and I actually really like these games and the design of everything, except one thing that I'll mention shortly. The different planets offer a great variety of styles, from snow, fire planets, industrial planets and so on. The courses are all pretty long and have plenty of twists and turns, as well as boost pads on the floors and jumps. So what I don't like is the fact that this and many other future racing games seem to have really narrow tracks a lot of the time, meaning you spend a hell of a lot of the race just bouncing off the sides. At least at first you will, if you're shit like me. After a while though, you will get used to the handling and it becomes less annoying. To be fair though, there are actually a fair amount of pretty wide ones in this game. After some of the qualifying races, you get access to your weapons. The way these work is similar to games like Gradius. You have a standard laser weapon which you can always use, but this does run out of energy if you go too crazy, so you want to make every shot count. But you can also collect icons on the races which fill up your special weapon bar from left to right. You get energy drains, boosts, mines, rockets and ammo refill. Once you've collected enough icons to highlight the bar to the item that you want to use, you press the circle button to select it. Then it's ready for you to use again, and you just press the circle button a second time when you actually want to use it. This works well, and there's often a bit of risk versus reward as you decide if you want to take the item that you're on and try and zap the other racers, or if you've got time to grab another icon or two for a more powerful one. And the racing here is fast and frantic. You don't often have too much time to think. The races are fast and the game moves at a great pace. Thankfully, the draw distance is excellent, so you can almost always see what's coming up, unless it's specifically designed not to let you. Couple this with a really cool techno soundtrack that every future racing game has to have according to law, and you've got an all-round fun package, just like Topia Von Doom. Completing the courses unlocks more tracks to race on, characters to race as, and bikes for you to choose from, and there's plenty of reasons to come back. And of course there's the multiplayer, which if you have a few friends that like racing, will likely have a blast with this one. Definitely recommended.
All systems are okay. Go, go, go!
Another fighting game now with Xiaolin Showdown, though this is more of a platform party fighter than a tournament fighter. There's a story here where an evil punk kid called Jack has an army of robots, so our 4 Shaolin ninja kids in training set out to stop him. The story mode here is a strange one and can be played with up to 4 players. It's a sort of co-op, sort of not game. In every level, Jack will set robots to attack you, and the 4 of you have to defeat these robots. You want to destroy as many as you can, but you also want to destroy more than the other characters, so you've got to fight them and stun them so they can't attack the robots. Every now and then items will appear, and again you want to collect more than the others, so you might need to fight them. Eventually a boss will appear and you'll need to work together to destroy it. It's chaotic and quite fun. Each of the characters plays the same but has the tropes of being slow and strong, fast and weak and everything in between. You can choose from Woo powers, which are basically your magic attacks. These can be used by any character. There's an ice one that freezes nearby enemies and friends, a fire one that spits flames everywhere, a wind one that catches people in whirlwinds, and so on. As well as this, power-ups appear from time to time to give you power and speed boosts. If you're getting your ass kicked, you'll need health, and to replenish this, you actually need to fight the other characters, and they'll drop health orbs which will replenish yours. This is an interesting mechanic. In theory, you don't have to fight any other characters at any point and can just focus on the robots, but it is a good idea to give them a bit of a slap every now and then so they don't steal your shit. There's also coins that appear on levels. Collecting these lets you buy more of the magic powers, and you can equip a few at a time between levels and can switch between them during the fights. Also, at the end of every level you get a new power that appears, and then you have to play a minigame against all the other characters, with the winner being the one that actually gets to use it. It is a strange way to make you work together at times, but not at other times, and I actually think it's a cool idea that could really be more fleshed out. The main problem here though is that every level plays exactly the same, but with a slightly different layout. Now you could argue that all fighting games are like that, but there's no combos or special moves to learn, it's just hammering the attack button or magic button. The levels do drag on for way too long, and this is clearly aimed at a younger audience, and the game stops to explain everything that's happening every time, even a few levels in. We get it, and you can't even skip these things. My advice though is to turn off the hints in the menu unless you want to be told how to double jump every 5 minutes. Hint hint, you press jump twice. Graphically, it's actually quite good. I feel like it looks like it's based on a cartoon or something, but I've never heard of it. Yeah, I could look it up, but then you guys wouldn't have a reason to comment and get me further up the algorithm. If you have a younger person to play with, I think they'll enjoy this. It's simple and repetitive, and a game that anyone can pick up and play. And finally for today, here is the X-Files, Resist or Serve. This is a really good survival horror game that takes more than a few bits of inspiration from Resident Evil series, but ties it into the X-Files world really well. You play through 3 episodes here, which are each connected to the next, where some strange goings on are happening and something is turning people into zombies. Yep, flesh-eating zombies. Of course, Mulder and Scully are on the case, with Mulder convinced it's probably something to do with either the government or aliens, or more likely both, whereas Scully thinks there has to be a more rational scientific explanation for everything that's happening. At the start of the game you get to choose if you want to be Mulder or Scully, and while you play through the same stories, you do that thing where it's from their different perspectives, with each character sharing some of the same levels and scenes, but often having their own way to play through them. As with Resident Evil, it's a great way to play the stories and show more of what's going on. It's all done in classic survival horror style, with fixed camera angles and lots of dimly lit areas. There's enemies to fight, and while I'd say there is more here than your typical survival horror game, it's really the story and exploring and puzzle solving that's the focus. But the combat is pretty good here too. There's a few guns that you get throughout the game and a fair amount of ammo. You can aim and shoot, and you can even move a bit while aiming, but you won't want to use your guns too much because you can still run out. You also have a melee attack which comes in very handy, and you should try and use it as much as you can. Maybe fire a couple of shots to stun the enemy, then just go in and whack him in the face with the butt of your gun, or failing that, run away. You'll need to find clues and evidence, as well as plenty of keys and random items that look useless but can be used later in the game. And as you'd expect, you've got a limited inventory. So the main loop is solve the puzzles, kill the enemies and move on. They really nailed the atmosphere here, and they have David Duchovny and Gillian Anderson actually voicing their characters, which means David Duchovny features here twice, as he's also the voice of the main character in XIII as well. The graphics are good, but sometimes the character models can be a little dodgy, but really that's a product of most games that go for the realistic look from this era. All things considered, they did a good job. And if you're a fan of the show, like I am, then you'll really enjoy the story. It's genuinely really engrossing and very similar to those found in this series. The biggest problems that I had with the game is that sometimes the camera angles and dark levels make things quite hard to see, and I'd even get stuck on things that I couldn't make out in the dark. And sometimes the camera would switch angle, and that would mean the controls flip and I'd just run between 2 screens. Also, some of the puzzles were a little too vague, and I'd be running around aimlessly for a lot longer than I would have liked. But that's alright, because we have the internet, and what I really like here is that there's an infinite ammo cheat for the game, always appreciated. Overall, this is one of those games that's way better than you'd think. It's definitely a must-play for fans of the series, and I'd say one for anyone that likes survival horror. So there you go, 10 games for the PS2 starting with the letter X that you might not have played. What other games could I have included? I know there's those Xenogears Chronicles or whatever they're called. They're meant to be good, but I think a lot of people know about those, and also it's an RPG. And also the file was about 7 GB. Ain't no one got time to download that. On screen now you can see where you can follow me, so why not do so? I've got loads of great content for everyone to enjoy. And now all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.